So now that we've got all of our stones done, we're going to do all of the grout in between the stones. So we bring in our photo reference and we just kind of see where our darkest spots are going to be and we focus on those. So I'm going to start right here, kind of the darkest spot. I'm going to work left to right and get all of these dark spots, figuring out kind of where the light spots are. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to start establishing these darker spots. So if you notice on your photo reference, there's a little bit of white or a lighter area between the grout and the stones. So I'm going to make sure to leave a little bit of that highlight that really defines that space between the grout and brick. I'm just going through, scribbling in areas that are going to end up being dark, kind of figuring out where everything's going to go. And I've just moved on to another area that's going to be dark. I'm laying down scribbles of where this core shadow that's being cast by this brick's going in the mortar. And I can go back and I can darken it up later, but I just want to get this in so I can kind of see where I'm going. And if there's any cracks in the mortar, you can draw those in, get those where they're supposed to go. So this area down below this stone is going to be extremely dark, so I'm going to be scribbling in a lot of value to darken this up, and I'm going to have to go over with hatching and cross hatching to have that core shadow being cast across this part of the drawing. So here's another spot you can see. I'm leaving white of the page between the brick and the mortar. And you can see the shadow here, and there's a definite line between the two of just light. So I'm going to make sure to leave these lighter areas to really show the texture and depth of this. So you can see in the photo reference of this part that it is very, very dark with very little midtones in it. So I'm really going to go through and darken this up with hatching and scribbles to give me that value I'm looking for. And again, I'm just going around the drawing, finding the darkest points in the grout and scribbling those values in. It's giving me the texture, it's also darkening it up and giving me these shadows that's being cast. Now I'm going to start kind of going through and I'm going to start putting in some of my midtones, so just some lighter scribbling and establishing some texture and value. So for the most part, the mortar between all the stones is lighter, so we don't want to do a ton of this, but we do need to get this in to give it texture. So we bring in our photo reference and you can see there's definitely spots that are darker and lighter spots. So we want to keep it like that as much as we can. I mean, some of these spots are extremely dark. So what we want to do is if we move on to stippling now and get all our detail in of this texture and start building up the value, that's really going to help us to see where we might need to add more scribbling and hatching to darken this up. So with this mortar, I'd say a majority of it is gonna be stippling. It's a tedious process, but if you look at a photo reference of this, it's the texture we get. And so you can see I'm going back and forth, and I've done some stippling around this area and realized that I needed the core shadow to be a little darker, so I did some hatching and went back to stippling. You can go back and forth between the styles, it doesn't matter, but just make sure you're getting it to the point you like. I've done my stippling around this area, and this core shadow can use to be a little darker, so I'm going in and doing some hatching. I'm going right back to stippling. The more stippling that you do, the better texture you're going to get. Now, there are spots that are light with very little texture that you can see because of the light source is so bright on them, and you can leave those somewhat the white of the page. I still want some stippling in there, but not a lot. But for the most part, get as many dots in here as you can. And I see some spots that need a little more scribbling to build up value. I stop stippling, go ahead and fill those in with some scribbling. Going back and building up my midtones in areas that I feel like need it more, and you can do scribbling over stippling to build up that value. They can overlap. That is perfectly fine. Now I go back down here and I can see some spots that just need to be a little darker. I'm just going to go over those with my pen with some light scribbles. So that's it. That is the end of our brick wall drawing with pen. There's been some amazing stuff you guys have done. I appreciate the time and effort you guys are putting into this. So go through, get the stippling in that you want in, get as much as that of that texture as you can in there, and I'm looking forward to our next project.